Hello, folks, and welcome back. It's the Send Your Kids to College podcast with Jeff Boron, Certified College Planning Specialist. We are here again. It's scholarship season. So, Jeff, I wanted you to sort of reintroduce what our intentions are today and let the viewer know about how you're reviewing last year's applicants and what they need to know about this year's applicants.
So Send Your Kids to College has been doing a Young Achiever Scholarship, for probably close to a decade now. We select 3 Western New York students. That's what's important. This is only for Western New York students. They're the only ones that can apply. Western New York high school students for a chance to win one of 3 $1,000 scholarships. So it's a process where you complete an application. You write a 300-word essay, which is the tricky part because you have to get a lot of information across in just 300 words. And then you submit it. It gets reviewed, and some of the finalists will be called in for an interview with the student and their parent. And from there, we select the 3 finalists. And interesting news, Jeremy, we've selected the 3 finalists. We'll be publishing those next week, or the 3 award winners, I should say, from the 2021 program. A little hint, there are 2 students actually from Star Point this year and 1 student from Lancaster who are receiving the scholarship.
Awesome. And, you know, a big part of that, why we wanted to kind of get on the microphone today on the podcast, and thank you again for anyone back, and please, you know, let your Western New York neighbor know about the podcast, as we're going to continue to come back, you know, semi-routinely and talk about the various different aspects. This is sort of the announcement for next year, but can you touch on some of the things as you went through last year's applicants and how this sort of process has evolved as time has gone on? Because I know that this isn't, you know, anything new, so to speak.
Right. So, you know, the applicants, we review all of these scholarship essays primarily and their criteria. And it's important to know that you have to be a Western New York high school student. And we're looking for some of the grades that are a little bit earlier so that we encourage people to start the process earlier in high school rather than to be a late stage, last minute college planner. Those students then, there's probably 25 each year that get selected to do the face-to-face interview. The interviews are about 20 minutes long. It's a standard interview process. Everybody get asked the same question. And from there, you know, we're kind of getting a feel for the student, and we're looking for not necessarily who's the highest academic achiever, but who's a well-rounded student who's given back to the community, who's done some things, you know, whether it be for school, the community, athletics, etc., but that they're involved and that they're doing something outside of just studying and playing video games.
Right. And, you know, as you were sort of going through some of that, it brings me back to being that age, so to speak, and knowing how, you know, you think that you're the oldest you ever are, obviously, at that age. And how do you think that process may help a student, not only in this sort of, you know, vacuum or this minor, you know, scholarship application process with Send Your Kids, but the bigger picture and planning ahead for potential job interviews, potential interviews to get in with these schools? Do you feel that this kind of process with working with you is somewhat of a good trial run or practice?
It does do that, but more importantly, what it does is get the student and sometimes their parents doing what I call the college money talk, because one of the questions on the scholarship is, how are you going to pay for this? And oftentimes that comes up too late in the whole college search, college selection process, and there's a lot of emotions and disappointment. So that's one of the things that we're trying to encourage early on, is for the parents and the students to have what we call the college money talk. And this is one way of doing that.
And as far as the 3 winners this year, you mentioned Star Point and Lancaster. How long have you been doing this scholarship, and have you seen sort of different regions start to learn more about the scholarship, or how has that sort of passed through Western New York over the years?
It does. There are certain pockets where I think it's the guidance counselors, maybe some of the administrative staff and teachers are encouraging the students to participate in these scholarship programs and start applying for scholarships. So Starpoint certainly is one of those schools. Lancaster is another. We see a lot of applications from Iroquois and have had many past winners from Iroquois, as well as Clarence and Williamsville schools. Those are kind of the predominant ones that we see coming in.
And this year, this is sort of the announcement for the scholarship, but when will these students need to know they have to have this stuff done by? And then we'll get into a couple of little tips that you may have as far as that essay portion, because there's a couple different portions. Who can apply and when is the deadline?
Right, so the deadline is July 1st. Scholarship applications are up on our website, sendyourkidstocollege.org. It's a fillable PDF, so we've made it even easier for these students to apply. They go on the website, they open up the fillable PDF, and they can type their essay right into there. And it should take that student 20 minutes to a half hour, unless they have to really think about their answers for the essay, which is good because that means they haven't thought about some of these questions that are very important.
Yeah, and that's exciting. And you mentioned starting it a little bit earlier. So for the viewer, not to make anyone feel as though maybe they're too late or to put that pressure on, but genuinely and honestly, what's the right time to start thinking about this, and what's the right time to really start thinking about this?
I think the right time is for students, going into, let's say, their sophomore year of high school. Parents should plan from the day that child is born. We know that doesn't happen. But for the parents and the students to start getting involved, when that student's entering, let's say, 10th grade, that's a critical time. And especially when you look at financial aid, because financial aid looks back 2 years with regards to tax information. So if there's any planning that we want to do to help increase or maximize financial aid, we have to start early.
And so that stuff that you had just mentioned as far as the retroactive, is that sort of activity helps the case down the road in some respects?
Right, and it helps the case because it starts that student thinking about colleges and weeding out some of those colleges that won't be a good fit either academically, socially, or financially for that student. So we don't want to waste a lot of time doing college visits of schools that student shouldn't probably apply to, or get emotionally attached to a school that's not going to be in the cards.
It makes a lot of sense, and obviously that's what we're here to do, is sort of be a source for Western New York. As we know, there are other sources, but as we see in some of our marketing, there's not a lot of places for students and parents to go. There's like, .gov sites, and there's maybe a guidance counselor that's helping a lot of different students. How do you feel Send Your Kids to College approaches this process, sort of from all angles for a family, in terms of just sort of, the guidance counselor from the school locally? There are some federal sources of information out there on the internet, but you being somewhat local and being able to kind of work from the outside and not have any sort of biases or anything like that.
Right. Well, locally, I think is important because if we look at, I've been doing this now for almost 2 decades, and if we look at the history of Western New York students, we all started out thinking about some of these schools, let's say in California or out in the West, out maybe in the South, Florida, whatever. But that's turning out to be the rare exception. So we start out with this huge net of schools that we're looking at, and we typically end up going to one of maybe 20 schools that I've worked with repeatedly through the years, and I know them in and out. That's how the college planning process really evolves, and the local students will typically go to that list of 20 schools, which we've worked with for years.
And that's extremely helpful. And we want to remind the viewer too, always head over to the blog. There's a lot of helpful resources. There's some downloadable PDFs that talk about the College Money Talk. And just a reminder to follow on Facebook. And if you haven't subscribed to the podcast wherever you listen, please do, because we're going to be back. We're always going to kind of come on here and touch on some things as we go throughout the college planning years. But again, we're here for anyone in Western New York. So who can reach out to you, and how can they reach out to you just to get started and start the conversation about some of this stuff?
So probably the best thing to gather some information off the website, sendyourkidstocollege.org, or they can call me directly at 689-7477, which is my office number. And I'd love to have a conversation, even if you have a question about something going on. We just love helping parents and students in Western New York.
Thank you, Jeff. Is there anything else that you wanted to add about the scholarship application process today?
Don't delay and get yours in.
Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate it, and thank you again to the viewers out there in Western New York. Please tell a friend if you like what you heard today, and remember, give this guy a call if you need any help with college planning. So thank you, Jeff.
Thanks, Jeremy.